In 1978, the highways of California were a dangerous place, especially for young hitchhikers. And that's where the story of Mary Vincent, a 15-year-old runaway with big dreams of becoming a professional dancer, began. Mary grew up in Las Vegas in a struggling household. Dancing was her escape, the one place where her body and mind felt free. But after family conflicts escalated, she packed a bag and left, headed toward Los Angeles, determined to start a new life. On September 29th, under the bright desert sun, she stood on the roadside with a cardboard sign. Many cars passed her without slowing down. Then, a battered blue van pulled over. Inside was an older man wearing a worn-out baseball cap. He looked like someone's grandfather, soft-spoken, smiling awkwardly. "I'm heading to Reno," he said. "I can drop you off on the way." But something was off. Other hitchhikers nearby whispered to her not to get in. They didn't trust him. They sensed unease. But Mary was exhausted, sunburned, dehydrated, and desperate to move forward. Against her instincts, she climbed in. Inside, the van smelled like old oil and stale cigarettes. The rear seats were removed, an odd detail Mary noticed but brushed aside. The man spoke gently, asking questions about her family, her dreams, her life. He seemed harmless, almost fragile. But then she realized something. They were headed the opposite direction. When Mary pointed it out, he apologized with a strange smile. "Just a little detour." Her heartbeat quickened. Something was wrong. She didn't know it yet, but she had just stepped into the van of a man who had a long history of violence. A man who had chosen her not out of kindness, but opportunity. Mary Vincent was about to face what most people would not have survived. Yet somehow, she would become the girl who took back her life. Hours passed. The man continued driving, talking casually like nothing was wrong. The sun began to set, and the world outside the van shifted into desert twilight. Mary's discomfort deepened. He wasn't just making a detour. He was avoiding exits. Still, she tried to stay calm. She had learned in her young life that panic never helped anyone. She studied him, the way his fingers trembled when he gripped the wheel, how he avoided eye contact whenever she questioned him. At one point, they stopped at a gas station. Mary climbed out to stretch, and a wave of relief washed over her. She considered running. But the parking lot was empty, and it was getting dark. The man came around the van, smiling. "You're safe with me. I raise daughters." It sounded rehearsed, like a practice line. When they got back on the road, Mary noticed something in the footwell. A tool. A long, thick tool that didn't belong in a passenger area. She swallowed her nerves. The sky turned black. The temperature dropped. Mary shivered, pulled her sweatshirt tighter, and told him she was tired. "There's a place I know," he said. "We can stop and rest." He turned onto a deserted gravel turnout miles from the highway. No lights. No cars. No houses. The engine clicked to silence when he turned it off. Mary's instincts were screaming. He stepped out and opened the rear of the van. Something rattled metal. Heavy. Mary leaned forward, peering into the darkness. "Run, Mary, run now." She took a slow breath and braced her feet on the edge of the van door, ready to leap out and sprint into the desert. But then she hesitated. If she ran now and he chased her, she would be alone, injured, and lost in miles of empty terrain. She didn't know the town, didn't know the roads. She thought waiting was safer. Just seconds later, she would regret that hesitation. The man turned toward her, and his entire demeanor shifted. His friendly facade vanished. His voice was low, cold. "I need you to do what I say." Mary's world tilted into terror. She wasn't dealing with a confused old man. She was trapped in a van with a predator. But she didn't know. She was about to do something no victim had done before. She would fight. And she would not die. Mary froze as the man's tone changed, no longer casual, no longer pretending. The desert wind howled outside the van. The world felt too quiet, too empty. Her instincts screamed. He isn't confused. He's dangerous. Mary tried to reason with him, speaking gently, hoping to de-escalate. I just want to get some sleep. We can drive in the morning. But his expression darkened. His eyes weren't friendly anymore, they were calculating. He stepped closer. Mary knew then that being polite would not save her. She had survived difficult situations before, running away from home, navigating strangers, relying on her own wits as a teenager on the road. And now those same survival instincts snapped into place. She grabbed the closest object she could reach, a wooden stick used to prop the van's window open, and swung. The attacker stumbled back, stunned. Mary jumped out of the van and ran barefoot into the darkness. But the road was gravel, sharp and uneven. Her legs burned with exhaustion. She heard him behind her, heavy footsteps pounding against the dirt. He caught up. She screamed, loud enough that her throat tore, but the night swallowed the sound. There were no houses. No headlights. No one to hear her. The struggle ended with brutal force, and Mary was dragged back toward the van. Inside that dark, empty turnout, Mary felt her world shrink into a single truth. No one was coming. She had to save herself. And even as fear took the air from her lungs, a different emotion rose beneath it. Anger. This man had picked her because she was young. Because she was alone. Because he thought she would be easy to erase. But Mary was not a victim. She was a fighter. Hours passed in a nightmare blur. Mary stayed conscious, not because she wasn't terrified, but because something inside her refused to shut down. Every breath she took was fueled by one desperate, burning thought. I will survive. At dawn, when he finally grew tired and believed she was broken, he told her to gather her clothes. He turned his back, certain she wouldn't fight again. He underestimated her. With what little strength she had left, Mary lunged and grabbed a metal object. She swung with everything she had. It connected, but not hard enough. He snapped. Mary's world spun. And then, darkness. But even unconscious, Mary's mind clung to one final command. Live. Because she was not done yet. When consciousness returned, it came back slowly, like surfacing through black water. Mary opened her eyes and realized she was no longer inside the van. She was lying on hard dirt. The morning sky was gray, and cold air bit at her skin. The world around her felt unreal, silent, indifferent. She tried to move, but her body wouldn't respond the way she expected. Her mind registered one horrifying truth. He had left her to die. Mary wasn't supposed to be alive. Most people in her situation would have shut down, slipped away, waited for the pain to stop. But Mary was built from something different. She felt terror, yes, but she also felt rage. He wanted her story to end here. He wanted her to disappear in the desert, erased and forgotten. Not today. Not her. She shifted her weight, pushing through shock. She forced her mind to think, not feel. I am not dying here. She moved slowly, inch by inch. Her vision blurred, and her breathing came in sharp, frantic bursts. She didn't know exactly where she was or how far civilization might be. But she knew one thing. She had to get back to the road. She staggered onto her feet, disoriented, weak, but unbelievably alive. She wasn't thinking about revenge or justice or what came next. Only survival. The terrain sloped downhill, and Mary used gravity as leverage, planting her heels carefully. With every step she whispered to herself, "Don't stop. One more step. Keep going." The sun climbed, and heat radiated off the rocks. She felt dizzy, dehydrated, barely conscious. But her determination shoved her forward. Eventually, she spotted something through the haze, a thin strip of gray cutting across the landscape. A road. Mary forced her body toward it. The edges of her vision darkened. She stumbled, collapsed once, then twice. But she crawled until her knees bled against gravel. At the edge of the highway, she pulled her body upright and stood in the lane, arms raised, not caring if a car hit her. She would rather be struck by a vehicle than disappear unseen. Time stretched. Minutes felt like hours. Then, faintly, a truck appeared in the distance. Mary's vision blurred, and she nearly collapsed again. The truck slowed down. But when the driver got close enough to see her condition, he sped up. He kept going. He left her standing there. Mary swayed, exhausted, a sob trapped in her chest. But she didn't fall. Because she wasn't done. Seconds later, another car appeared. A couple on their honeymoon. They stopped, this time not out of pity, but shock, because what they saw was a girl who refused to die. They screamed for help. They wrapped her in towels. They drove her to safety. And as Mary faded into the back seat, she whispered one sentence. "He can't hurt anyone else." She wasn't just surviving. She was already planning justice. Mary woke in a hospital room to the sound of machines and nurses whispering. Bright lights hurt her eyes. Everything felt unreal, like she had woken inside someone else's life. Doctors hovered around her, speaking quietly about blood loss, infection risk, and surgeries ahead. But Mary didn't care about her injuries. She cared about justice. The moment detectives entered her room, Mary forced herself upright. Her voice was shaky, but her will was iron. "I can help you find him." The officers hesitated. She had barely survived, and they worried questioning her would cause emotional trauma. They expected a terrified child. But Mary was no longer a child. She was a survivor with a mission. Detectives listened as she recounted every detail she could remember. The van's interior. The driver's thick eyebrows. His uneven smile. The torn upholstery on the passenger door. And most importantly, his appearance. One detective began sketching based on Mary's description. She corrected him repeatedly. "No, the nose is flatter, more rounded. At the crease near his left eye. His eyebrows are thicker like this." Even while trembling, even in pain, Mary refused to let anything be wrong. Her memory had become her weapon. When the sketch was completed, a chill went through the room. It was nearly perfect. Investigators took the composite sketch public. The media picked it up. The headline hit the evening news. "Survivor identifies attacker." Within 48 hours, a call came in from someone who recognized the drawing. Mary's attacker was arrested. At the lineup, police told Mary she didn't have to attend. They worried seeing him would re-traumatize her. Mary looked them straight in the eye. "I want to look him in the face." They brought her into the viewing room. On the other side of the one-way mirror stood several men. Mary scanned each face. Then she stopped. Without hesitation, she lifted her chin and pointed. "That's him." The room fell silent. Her voice didn't shake. She had faced the monster who tried to erase her. And instead of fear, she radiated power. Soon the courtroom would too. But the world was about to learn something even more shocking. Mary's attacker had done this before. And if the law didn't stop him, Mary would make sure the world knew what he was capable of. News spread quickly. A 15-year-old girl had survived an attack no one should have survived. When the case went to trial, the courtroom was packed. Journalists, attorneys, curious locals. They weren't there just for justice. They came to see the girl who lived. Mary entered the courtroom wearing hospital-issue clothing, her posture straight, chin lifted. Nothing about her said victim. She carried herself like someone who'd already won. But when the prosecution rested their case, something shifted. The defense strategy was brutal. They tried to portray Mary as unstable and unreliable, pushing the idea that her trauma had warped her memory. The defense attorney questioned her like she was the criminal. "You're emotional, aren't you? You were running away from home. Your judgment was compromised." They hinted she might have misidentified the attacker. They implied her story was exaggerated. But Mary didn't break. She leaned into the microphone and answered clearly, precisely. "I remember his face. I will never forget his face." Then the prosecutor asked Mary one final question, one that would stay with the courtroom forever. "Do you see the man who did this to you in this courtroom today?" Mary turned slowly toward the defense table. The attacker sat there, expression cold, unemotional, annoyed more than anything else. He crossed his arms, refusing to meet her eyes. Mary lifted her hand and pointed. "It's him." Her voice didn't tremble. "He's the one. The courtroom fell silent. Even hardened reporters later wrote that they felt something electric in that moment, like watching a victim transform into a witness, and a witness transform into a force. The man tried to smirk, tried to hide behind legal technicalities. But Mary's very existence was the evidence. Her survival defeated his defense. Sentencing day. The judge reviewed everything, including the calculated nature of the attack, the attempt to destroy evidence, and the brutality of leaving a minor for dead. After what felt like an eternity, the judge spoke. "I sentence you to the maximum allowed, 14 years. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. 14 years. That was all the law allowed. Mary stared forward, jaw tight. Her voice was calm when she finally spoke about the sentencing later. "I felt like I was sentenced too, only I didn't do anything wrong. But justice wasn't done. Because even though the world wanted to forget him, the man would not forget her. And years later, he would come after someone else." When Mary heard the news of what happened after his release, her past would come roaring back. When the judge sentenced him to 14 years, Mary thought the nightmare was over. She thought justice had spoken. But what she didn't know was that 14 years was the maximum sentence allowed, not for attempted murder, but for kidnapping. The court refused to label the attack for what it was. 14 years. Mary was stunned. She had lost so much, yet legally, his punishment was equivalent to stealing a car. Even worse, he didn't serve 14 years. He served 8. Early release for good behavior. The news hit Mary like a punch. Good behavior? He only behaved because he couldn't get to another girl. By the time she learned he was free, her attacker was already back in the world. Mary began to live with a new kind of fear. She slept with weapons by her bed. She moved houses regularly. She studied every noise outside the window. Every car that slowed near her apartment. Every unexpected knock at the door. Her heart stopped. She had become her own security system, her own guard, her own protector. Because the thing about surviving a monster is, you don't get a finish line. You carry the danger with you. Friends told her. He'll forget about you. Move on. But Mary remembered the last words he ever said to her before he left her in the dirt. I'll finish the job someday. He was free. She was not. So Mary tried to rebuild a life shaped around her new reality. She learned to use prosthetic arms. She learned to cook, paint, write, things doctors insisted she would never do again. She became a public speaker. She taught other survivors how to stay alive psychologically, not just physically. But every birthday, every milestone, every moment she achieved something new. She wondered where he was, what he was doing, who he was watching now. And then, years later, the news broke. Another girl. Another attack. This time, the victim didn't survive. And suddenly, the world realized. Mary Vincent had tried to warn them. The headline punched Mary harder than any fist ever could. Convicted kidnapper arrested for murder of young woman. She froze. Different town. Different girl. Same monster. He hadn't changed. He hadn't rehabilitated. He hadn't found religion or redemption. He just found another victim. The woman was a mother of 2. She had been renting a room in his house. He murdered her, then tried to hide her remains in the most horrific way imaginable. Mary couldn't breathe. For years she had lived in fear, knowing he was capable of killing someone. Now, the worst thing she had ever imagined was splashed across the evening news. Journalists dug deeper. They asked Mary for interviews. They said things like, "How does it feel knowing you were right?" But Mary didn't want to be right. She didn't want another woman to die to prove what she already knew, that he should never have walked free. What came next was even more disturbing. She learned he still talked about her. Even after all those years. Like she was unfinished business. Mary realized something chilling. He wasn't just a danger to women. He was a danger specifically to her. That's when she made a decision that would rewrite the meaning of survival. She wasn't going to hide anymore. She wasn't going to change her name or disappear. She was going to walk straight into a courtroom and face him again. Not as a terrified teenager, but as a woman who had rebuilt herself. Piece by piece. Scar by scar. Finger by finger. When she entered the courtroom, every eye turned toward her. She took her seat on the witness stand. No prosthetics, she wanted him to see exactly what he'd done. And when she looked at him, she didn't see a monster. She saw something smaller. Weaker. Pathetic. He glared at her with the same hatred he always had. Mary stared back and thought. You took my arms. You don't get to take my life. She testified with a voice that cut through the courtroom like steel. She told the jury everything, in brutal, unwavering detail. He avoided eye contact. For the first time, he looked afraid. Because now, she had something stronger than fear. She had power. The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that feels like an inhale that never ends. When Mary finished testifying, no one moved. Not the jurors. Not the reporters. Not even him. She had walked in as a survivor. But she walked off the witness stand as something bigger. Proof that he could not destroy her. Her words weren't angry or dramatic. She didn't scream. She didn't tremble. She simply told the truth. The prosecutor asked the final question. Do you believe he will hurt another woman if he is released? Mary didn't blink. Yes. Not whispered. Not shaky. Just yes. When the jury returned, the verdict came fast. But sentencing, that was different. Mary sat in her seat, breathing slowly, waiting. Her attacker was brought into the courtroom wearing prison jumpsuit orange. He kept his head down. The judge began to speak. You are a danger to society. You have shown no remorse. You have shown no humanity. Mary stared at the back of his head, remembering the truck, the ropes, the cold canyon ground. Then the judge delivered the words Mary had waited decades to hear. Life in prison. Not parole. Not leniency. Life. The kind of sentence that meant he would never again walk out into the world and look for another girl. Mary didn't cry. She thought she would. She thought she'd feel relief or joy or triumph. Instead, she felt a silence inside her, a silence finally free of fear. He turned once before leaving the courtroom. Mary didn't look away. For the first time, he wasn't looking at prey. He was looking at the woman who ended his freedom. He disappeared through the courtroom door, swallowed by a hallway that would lead him to a cell. And Mary felt something lift off her chest. Not forgiveness. Not peace. Freedom. She walked out of the courthouse into the sunlight, feeling the warmth on her skin. Her life wasn't defined by what he took. It was defined by what she refused to give. Her voice. Her strength. Her future. The world would tell her she was a victim. But she knew the truth. She was the reason he would never hurt anyone again. Mary walked out of the courthouse not as the girl from the news, not as the victim with the missing arms, but as Mary Vincent, the woman who refused to disappear. She began rebuilding her life, piece by piece. Doctors fitted her with prosthetic arms, heavy, awkward, and painful to use. But Mary forced herself to learn anyway. She worked until she could write, cook, brush her hair, and even sketch again. Yes, sketch. Because long before the canyon, long before the truck, long before the nightmare, Mary had loved to draw. And she took back that too. Eventually, she rebuilt her talent into something extraordinary. People bought her art. She became known not for what she lost, but for what she created. When reporters asked how she stayed strong, she always said the same thing. I refused to let him have my future. Mary later became a speaker for trauma survivors. In front of auditoriums filled with strangers, she told her story, not to relive the pain, but to remind others of something powerful. You can survive what was meant to destroy you. Years later, investigators contacted Mary with chilling news. Her attacker, from his prison cell, had hired a lawyer and attempted to get early release. They needed someone to testify against it. Mary didn't hesitate. She walked into the hearing room, faced him again, and spoke with the same calm strength she had used the first time. He will hurt someone else if he ever walks free. That testimony shut down his appeal. He died behind prison walls, never seeing freedom again. Mary didn't celebrate his death. She didn't need to. Her victory happened years earlier, in the moment she stood up in court and used her voice to end his power. She once said in an interview, "Surviving wasn't the hard part. Living again was." And she did live. She painted. She helped other survivors. She raised a family. She built a life with purpose. The world remembers her because of what happened to her. But she will be remembered, truly remembered, because of what she did next. She fought back. She rebuilt. She won. Mary Vincent is not just a survivor. She is a legacy of unstoppable strength. A reminder that monsters don't win when victims stay silent. They win only when we don't speak. Mary spoke. And the world listened.